Coming up on the Sky News Daily with me, Niall Paterson. Haiti at war. Sky News gets caught in the crossfire between police and the gangs trying to take control of the country.
The first 100 days might be over, but President Trump is showing no signs of slowing down.
America will soon be greater than ever before.
So we're continuing to follow every twist and turn of this remarkable presidency.
And trying to make sense of what it all means for the US and for the rest of the world.
So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Malta Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Sky News Trump 100, wherever you get your podcasts.
Around a year ago, Sky's chief correspondent Stuart Ramsay and his producer Dominique van Heerden travelled to the Caribbean island of Haiti. What they found was a country plagued by criminal gangs, one run by a former copper called Barbecue. There were no-go areas for the police and the beginnings of a humanitarian disaster. Well, the situation certainly hasn't improved. In fact, since that visit, the gangs have strengthened their stranglehold over the capital, Port-au-Prince. The government has quite literally taken to the hills. Stuart and Dominique returned to see for themselves, and almost as soon as they stepped off the plane, they saw the violence that has become so common as to be almost unremarkable.
We're back. Okay, get in. It was one of our first days in Haiti. It was one of the first things we saw on Airport Road. We wanted to go to the edge of territory between government territory and gang territory. And as we came up, it was very quiet. Children were coming home from school. Their parents had just picked them up. They were in their school uniforms, holding hands, walking up towards an intersection. We saw two armoured police vehicles starting to edge up into the territory, the gang territory, when suddenly they both came under really heavy fire at the intersection.
And immediately the children, the parents and anyone else who's on the road disappears. And they know what's going to happen because as the police engage with the gangs, they know there's going to be a return of fire. And so everyone disappears. And you find yourself basically watching a battle between the gangs and the police, of which we were literally watching it. We were not part of it, if you see what I mean. We weren't being targeted, but we were very much in the line of fire.
I mean, a huge amount of gunfire. I mean, you've been, both of you, I mean, you've both been in war zones. I mean, is that what it felt like?
Yeah, that's really the point here. It is actually a war. Parts of Port-au-Prince is looking just like that. Destroyed buildings, ruins, firefights everywhere, bullets in all the buildings and all the rest of it. Drones are now being used in the fight. It's not just a battle against crime gangs. It's actually a battle between the security forces of Haiti, a UN-mandated mission that's primarily led by Kenyan security forces, and the gangs in huge, huge numbers. And they are fighting for territory.
How does it feel in that moment when the rounds are being fired, where you can hear them pinging past?
In war reporting, which we've both done a fair amount of, you certainly get used to understanding the line of fire, understanding which direction bullets are coming from, understanding what's close to you, what's not close to you. Since Stuart and I were involved in that incident in Ukraine where we were fired at in direct fire and Stuart was shot.
Yeah, I was shot that, yeah.
I can speak for myself. I'm probably a lot more sensitive to the sound of bullets these days. However, we could tell in that scenario that that was the police vehicle that was very specifically being targeted, not us. And so you learn to measure distance, to think about it. We have a team around us. We're all experienced, but we also have advisors with us who can also say, look, I think it's time to go, or you're still good, or whatever it might be. And we wear our protective equipment as well, of course.
That line you used there, that the sensitivity, the increased sensitivity to gunfire that you now have. I mean, you're not scared.
Oh, no, I think you're always scared. I think you're in a lot of trouble if you're not scared. Being scared isn't the issue. It's being able to continue to function while things are really quite nasty happening around you. And I think that's, as a reporting team, that's something we've got used to doing and have learnt that we can do it. We can just keep going and we can actually speak and make some sort of sense, because there are moments where you're so scared you can't really get yourself heard. I remember I've been looking at Dominique, and both of us have been opening and closing our mouths in Ukraine and making no noise whatsoever, just like, ah.
But the key word you used there was team. Because, of course, it's not just the two of you. You also had your cameraman.
Yeah.
And the problem is your cameraman's looking through his lens and not around him.
Absolutely. Our cameraman, Toby Nash, I mean, the pressure's on him in a scenario like that because he's the one trying to capture what it looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like, what it sounds like. In those moments, it's all on him. And because your adrenaline is so high and you're experiencing it, nothing you look at after you've filmed it will ever feel as visceral as it feels in that moment of witnessing it firsthand. Looking through the lens is the key here. But in that scenario, that then becomes a team's responsibility to keep an eye on him because he's looking for picture and we need to be watching his back, really.
Yeah, and listening and making decisions about where we will go next and all the rest of it. Now, in this instance, and you'll see in the video, but I'll describe it for us here, there's a lot of shots where you can hear and see a lot of movement, but the shot is extremely shaky. Now, that's because actually our security advisor and the people who were driving the cars that we were in were trying to reverse and move Toby back. What is interesting is that when you get some of those even moving shots that are slightly shaky, they're much more akin to reality. That's sort of how it feels when you're in it, that it feels jaggedy and ragged and you're jumping backwards and forwards and do I get into the car? We were in armoured cars, by the way, which is a real help. To film it nicely and to get all that atmosphere, Toby has to stay outside the car and so that he can get all of the atmosphere, because once you get into a metal box, which is very quiet, you lose a lot of the sense of what's going on. And that takes quite a lot of nerve and experience, and eventually the shots were getting, as the police car was returning down the road, slowly but surely it came into the line of fire with us behind it. And that's when Toby and our security advisor jumped into their car and we all reversed. But yeah, the key thing is the cameraman to get those pictures. And ultimately, it is dangerous. There's no two ways about it. To get that shot is dangerous. It's just about how far you go to get it.
And Port-au-Prince itself is clearly very dangerous right now. And I suppose what that incident demonstrates is the stranglehold that these criminal gangs have on the city, have on the country.
Yeah, 100%. And we were there a year ago and it felt pretty tense, but this time felt 100 times more tense than last time. You could also get a real sense of how much more territory they'd taken because roads we were able to drive down before, areas we were able to go to in government control, we couldn't go to anymore, now in gang control. And so those people all who lived in all those areas and those businesses that operated in those areas, everything's been squeezed into a very, very small part, like inner core of Port-au-Prince. And that's where you get a real sense that the gangs have pushed forward way more than what we expected, to be honest with you, Neil.
And you can't move around, because you can move around. It just takes forever to move around because more and more people are living in this smaller district of the city. So it's absolutely jam-packed. The roads are jam-packed. The houses where people live are jam-packed. The abandoned government buildings that they now live in are jam-packed. And it all adds that pressure cooker sense of danger as a result of everyone living so closely together.
Where have the government gone then, physically, if they're not in the government buildings?
They've abandoned a lot of those buildings and withdrawn, for all intents and purposes, up the side of a mountain, really. And until beforehand, the gangs were always, if you like, on the valley floor next to the sea. But now they're coming up the mountain, but they've also gone to the top of the mountain and are coming down it.
Yeah, it's completely surrounded, that core, but I think that's important to note. Port-au-Prince, the central core of it that's still free, is completely surrounded by gangs, completely. The government itself is like boxed into an area. It feels when you're there that they're very out of touch with what's actually going on down the mountain. They kind of stay up in the mountain and they helicopter in and out of Port-au-Prince for meetings, and that's about it, really.
It sounds like they're not running the country at the moment. So who is?
Well, the gangs are running an awful lot of it, and businesses run a lot of it. There is a health Department, for example. There are government offices that are still working. I mean, it was already very poor. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, and it's really badly run, and it has been for a very long time. It's just made worse by the gangs. I suppose law and order is kept. To what degree one considered it kept, but law and order it comes from the strength of the police, which is not very strong. Its army does nothing, and there's a UN mission led by Kenyan forces that made up of police and army that provide a level of support for that administration, this government administration. But it's almost like the country's forgotten that it's led by anyone. It just sort of exists.
And in times like that, you can understand why people might turn to gang leaders such as Barbecue and the control that he has. Tell me about this guy, because he is fascinating.
Barbecue's real name is Jimmy Chirizia. He was a Special Forces police officer. Became angry about corruption in the government and a bit disillusioned, really. He became this gang leader. He likes to sell himself as a bit of a Robin Hood figure. He's doing it for the poor. He's doing it for the people. He's doing it for the better of the country. But he is powerful. He controls the port in Port-au-Prince. So he controls absolutely every shipment coming into the country, or into the capital at least, including fuel. That means that businesses have to pay a huge levy, extortion essentially, and that's what funds the territories that he holds.
And a year ago, he stopped fuel being delivered to Haiti. Mm-hmm. That was it.
Which brings a country to its knees.
It had no fuel.
Yeah.
He had it all.
And many of the people who live in these territories, some are there by choice, I guess, because they subscribe to it, or perhaps their family members are employed by Barbecue and his gang. But others live in the territory because what they say is, well, no one's running the country anyway, and at least we know what we're getting here. So we pay to leave to go to work every day, and we pay for a bit of security, but at least there's a consistency, even if it's under a criminal. Whereas we go outside of this territory and we're unsafe from the gangs. We don't know what's going on. No one's running anything. There's no schools, etc. So you can kind of see how his whole pitch and vision starts to appeal even just to regular folk.
I mean, what is he like as an individual? I mean, you've met him. Is there any truth to the Robin Hood stylings that he's put on himself?
I mean, I think there's some truth. I mean, when we're with him, he deals out money to people left, right, and centre. He's always, older women would come over to talk to him, and he'd give them money. He would, kids could get sweets. He has a swimming pool, would you believe, in the midst of all of this. But if the kids do well at school, they're allowed to come in and swim in his pool. But one of the problems for Barbecue is that the gangs have now been designated by the United States as terrorist organisations. Now that is potential big change. They need to continue their fight against the security forces of Haiti as weapons, of course, and most of that comes from the United States. Now, it's one thing selling weapons on the black market to gangs. Selling them to terrorist organisations is a very different proposition. And so the United States has made, that's why its designation has been made. It means that the Kenyans can engage with lethal force without any further discussion, so they could kill them. UN-mandated peacekeeping mission. Kenya is the lead force, but it's not the only one. There are others involved. Their number two, for example, is Jamaican. There's a Jamaican officer.
The Kenyans are the only ones doing the fighting.
They're doing the fighting. Other Caribbean nations have sent soldiers. The United States and Canada have sent a lot of equipment. And to be fair to the United States, it is actually pretty much bankrolling the whole thing. So in one of the displacement camps, we met Barbara Gishiwi. She had been there for a month, and her baby was about a month old. So I said to her, "Did you have the baby before you got here?" And she said, No, I had the baby here. And I said, "Oh, where?" It's like, "Here." And that was against the side of a building under a plastic sheet, and she was still there. A miracle in many ways. The baby is very healthy, though there's an awful lot of cholera in the camps. She had no hope of going home ever. She said armed men came into the house, forced them to leave. As she said, they got to the street and they just ran away. And she'd been in this displacement camp ever since, and has every expectation of staying there for potentially ever. which when you think about it is remarkable because she was only probably, that displacement camp is probably only a few blocks away from where her home would be.
But incidents of the type that you described on Airport Road, for people like Barbara, am I to imagine that these are just commonplace, that those kids walking home from school hand in hand, that is something that they are dealing with, on a daily basis?
Yeah, Neil, there was nothing extraordinary about what we saw in film that day. Afterwards, our Haitian producer working with us, Stuart, was like, whoa, that was a bit intense. She was like, this is just an ordinary day in Port-au-Prince. She's like, I can't tell you the amount of times I've stopped in my car to wait for a firefight to be over before continuing on to work.
As she said, her biggest issue sometimes in the mornings is not running over dead bodies. Not that she sees dead bodies as an issue, it's the fact is they're suddenly on the street, which she wasn't expecting. So that is the level that you've got to, that, but yeah, you drive to work knowing that you're going to see dead people every day.
Could these gangs then soon be in control of Haiti? I mean, is that their ambition?
It seems to be their ambition. Certainly, it's Barbecue's ambition is to actually take over the control of the presidency. When we first met him, or last year we were talking, he basically said that he wanted things had changed. That they wanted to be involved in any type of peace process where their feelings and their demands were listened to on an equal basis. Now, countries who are supporting some type of talks won't sit down with crime gangs. They won't do that. And so that sort of got nowhere. But he predicted, if you don't, it's going to get worse. Well, it has got worse. So he would like to take over. He's formed a gang. What was originally called the G9, as 9 of the gangs came together. It's now morphed into
Vive Ensemble,
which is coming together, I believe it is. And that's basically a grouping. So they are sort of working together. Most of the violence used to be between the crime gangs themselves, with the society caught in the middle. It was when the gangs actually united and started fighting society. That's when it became a problem. As you were saying, Brunelli, who's our producer there, was telling us about her life. She grew up in a place where there were no gangs. Politicians created the gangs at the beginning to use them to get muscle on the street. Those gangs have now taken over and become more powerful themselves.
You reap what you sow.
It's a complete case of you reap what you sow.
And it's not a pipe dream, Neil, because speaking to sources in Port-au-Prince, the government has an evacuation plan to move its seat of power. So we're not talking about maybe if we'll see. They actually have a plan in place for if a certain neighborhood were to fall, that would be the cards would fall. Everything would fall.
So they would govern in exile?
They would govern in exile, yeah. They have a fully planned out plan about what they would do should that happen. So we're not talking about a far-fetched idea.
And a few weeks ago, a lot of people that we know well there were saying that in their own minds it was over. They just expected to wake up and find out that it had gone. That would be, by all of our estimations that we can work out, and everyone we've spoken to, the first capital city of the country run by gangs. And you could say that capital cities have been run by criminals in the past all over the world, but this would be officially gang-led, which is hard to imagine.
And you can watch the full series of reports from Stuart and the team on the website, skynews.com. Remember, if you like what you've heard, do give the podcast a follow. The Daily is back tomorrow.
The first 100 days might be over, but President Trump is showing no signs of slowing down.
America will soon be greater than ever before.
So we're continuing to follow every twist and turn of this remarkable presidency.
And trying to make sense of what it all means for the US and for the rest of the world.
So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Malka Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Sky News Trump 100, wherever you get your podcasts.